happy to be hosting this workshop as part of UNI.MINDS Festival. The mission of the whole festival is to strengthen industry-academia partnership and grow the innovation community in Slovenia. You can find more information about the whole festival and also the agenda on the webpage of the festival and in the Huva application. And you will find all the links in the chat. Today's workshop is focused on creating effectively strategies with special emphasis on sustainability strategies, and it will be led by Dr. Adriana Reitz-Buchovac. Adriana Reitz-Buchovac is a full professor of strategy at the School of Economics and Business at the University of Ljubljana. Her primary areas of expertise are corporate sustainability, strategy development, and its implementation. She is also co-author of a book, Making Sustainability Work, together with Mark J. Epstein, and Adriana also intensively works with corporate and non-profit organizations on strategy development. We encourage you to use these nice backgrounds that you see behind us, and you will find that link also in the chat box. Of course, and we encourage you to ask questions, and we will try to answer them all during the workshop or after. But now it's time for me to give the floor to Adriana, and she will be leading now the workshop. I will stop sharing, and the screen is now yours, Adriana.
Thank you, Jana. It's a pleasure to see you all, and I have agreed with Jana that this workshop is going to be tailored to the number of participants. So we'll see how many join us in the following minutes. And if there will be fewer, which is as many as you're now, then we can do the workshop all together. So we'll see how it goes. Now, the main challenge when I was asked to participate at this event was how to make sure that whatever makes the most purpose and sense in the strategy arena can be told and shared with you in an hour. So when I drafted my presentation, I thought, how about if I start with the most challenging issues about strategy development and implementation? So the beginning of my discussion today, and I encourage you to share with me your experience and your issues, is around how to make sure that the strategies will actually happen. So how to make strategies work. And then we will try and understand how we can develop strategies so that they will happen, right? So that's the course of the speech or of the presentation. So at the beginning, in a number of discussions that I had with my colleagues worldwide or with companies that I work with, and these range from the big corporations to smaller ones and to nonprofit organizations, we always find this issue that strategies rarely work. To put it differently, strategies rarely get implemented the way we plan them to be implemented. And the reason why this is so often goes down to one major problem, and this is that we are completely unprepared to manage change. If you look back at perhaps what you studied, if you're part of this business school curriculum, or what we hear in open discussion, rarely we think about strategy as something that deals with the change. But strategy is actually just about change. When I read large documents, 100 pages and more, I usually say this is too much. Strategic management, or the document that talks about strategy, is not about what you're doing operationally or what goes on in your company every day. It's about what are you doing differently in the forthcoming years. So these documents have to be concise, and they have to be small, they have to be compact, they have to talk about the changes only. And if we now think about strategy as what needs to change, then we have to be prepared for this unnecessary surprise that people will fight against change, that there will be some resistance to change. And one way to fight this resistance is to be prepared about what typically happens along this process and how we can, sort of counterfeit, how can we fight this resistance to change. So this inability to manage change effectively typically goes down to four basic problems, to four basic issues. And these are right there. The first one is that most companies unclearly articulate what is the final goal, the final destination, as we call it. So this short vision that we usually find on the website of companies, that is not enough. This can be used to communicate with the external audiences, but on the internal side, people need to have a much clearer picture, a vision of the final destination. So what are we trying to achieve? And I'll show with an example how this looks like. If you don't clarify that, people will have, different understandings of where we're going, and there will be fear around what is expected from us. Are we going to excel at this, whatever it is expected from us? So this fear from unknown is really bad. It's paralyzing. The second thing is that we typically speak about strategy, with numbers and sentences, with words, but it's not very helpful. What are we trying to change, and how the best way to approach that is to draw it, to design it. And I'll teach you how we draw strategies, how we design, how they look like. So poor or vague strategy means that it's typically difficult to understand, difficult to even visualize change that will happen across a couple of years. And the third issue is inadequate information sharing. People don't know what is going to be expected from them specifically at certain point in time among individuals, and this information sharing that this sport is usually taking place also among different units. And unless we provide people with exact performance measures and KPIs and the targets, they will not know how dynamically they have to change and how ambitious the targets are. And then the fourth and sometimes the most painful reason, and again, the cause for resistance to change, is because people at lower levels don't understand what are they in charge of, what are their accountabilities in terms of this big, strategic change. They have unclear responsibilities at lower levels. What I'm showing here are 4 really simple answers to these issues. And these 4 answers, or these 4 tools, can help you really easily manage this resistance to change. So at the first level, we have this destination statement. Somehow, I think, unusual word for the business people, but it's more than a vision statement. It clarifies with much, much higher level of conciseness, clarity, color, if you like, what the future is going to look like. So it's a very clear and exact definition of where we're going to be at a certain point in the future. Has anybody of you read the book Alice's Adventures in Wonderland? Yeah, okay. Anybody else? Yes, most of you have. So these are the kinds of book like the contemporary cartoons that are fun for the kids but very educational for adults. So Alice's Adventures in Wonderland is fun because it's fun, of course, because it has strong messages, but it's very useful for business people as well. You may recall at a certain point, Alice comes to a fork. There's crossroads, and she doesn't know which road to take. So she stays there for a while and thinks, where should I go? Which way should I, go forth? And there's the tree with the cat on the tree with the smart cat, and this smart cat is like the consultant, right? So Alice is the client, the company that tries to develop a strategy, and the cat is the consultant, and the cat should be advising her which road to take. But the cat is very smart, and the cat asks these questions. Where do you want to get to? What is your final destination? And then Alice says, I don't know. And then the cat should say, well, then it doesn't matter. You can take any road you want. Because after a while, you're again going to get to a crossroad and you'll be again confused. If you determine your final destination, I can advise you which road to take. So that's really important in strategic management. If you don't decide about what your final destination is going to be, you can go around in circles. You can write scenarios. It can be complicated, painful process and not very helpful to people that work with you. Now, strategic linkage model, the second one, I'm going to teach you or show you how we draw them. So it's about the picture. We draw like causal linkage maps. They are sometimes called like this as well. So they depict the connections, causes and consequences, causes and effects. And this is what strategy is about. keep in mind, it's about change. It's not about what we're going to continue doing. It's about what we're changing in the future. And you need to understand and anticipate the consequences of these changes. So linkage models, very popular. Most organizations worldwide, they have them. And we have to, practice, train how we draw them. And then in adequate information sharing, it's about picking the right KPIs and determining the right targets. Again, not an easy task. In these past weeks, I have worked with a large organization, foreign-owned, with the R&D department here in Slovenia, and with lots of people working in Slovenia as well, but a global one. And it took us a while to understand what a good KPI is and to pick the KPIs that are actually enabling the C-suite guys monitoring this company here in Slovenia strategically. So performance measures, KPIs, and their targets, very important. People know that the focus is going to be around KPIs. We can do lots of other things, but we're going to be measured and rewarded based on KPIs. And then the fourth one, cascading. Again, a catchy word. In Slovenian, we say stopničenje. You hierarchically try to push the top agenda down to lower levels. You cascade the top targets down to lower targets, and I'm going to show you how we do that. There's a lot of other issues, a lot of other problems that we face when we try to make strategies work, but I think these four are just on top. And above all of that, and that's my personal experience, is top managers' attention or top managers' attitude towards strategy. What I find, and that's a big disappointment to me quite often, is that once a strategy is developed, the attention to what it speaks about drops quickly and heavily. And rarely I see in practice, this following to my advice. And my advice is always make sure that you talk about strategy at least quarterly. Because if you're not talking about the strategy quarterly, then everybody else's attention is going to fade away, because that's your way of saying it's not important. If you raise an issue often enough and with enough rigor, then people will know that this is critical. This is something you care about, and keeping this level of attention high around any strategic issue is very important. It's part of the leading by example process. The top people have to lead by example in terms of how attentive they are towards these strategic changes. So often one of the reasons why everything just disappears and goes aside is because top management is not paying attention often enough and with enough, I think, personal interest in the changes. We will now go from one to another, and I'll show examples so you'll see what I'm talking about. Now, the first thing is the unclear articulation of the final destination. What are we trying to achieve? The case that I'm going to share with you is actually a very controversial case, so to speak, because it's Philip Morris International. Does any of you know what this company is trying to do?
Sell cigarettes.
Okay, cigarettes, good. It's a good start. So there are two companies. One is Philip Morris, PM, which is headquartered in America, and the other one is PMI, Philip Morris International, which is headquartered in Switzerland. And they fight against what the original company is doing. So Philip Morris International, okay, it's still in the smoking industry, but what they're after is to unsmoke this industry. They have developed a number of products that are labeled risk-reduced products or non-smoking products. You may be familiar with the IQOS or other heated tobacco units. So it is a smoking industry, but their vision of the future is that if they work hard, they'll manage to push away, from the market, the bad guys, the traditional cigarette producers, and bring in less harmful alternatives. That's what they're doing, yeah. So the case that I'm sharing with you is this PMI, Philip Morris International, that is, of course, very much interested in talking about what they're doing because they have very few possibilities to share their vision and mission. They are somehow banned in their communication. And in spring, I had a group of students working with me on their case. So that's what I can share with you. You know, the work that I do with other companies, typically I cannot share. So in terms of their final destination, you know, the destination statement that they created, or that we created together, that is what I'm sharing with you now. So this is for December 31st, 2025. A destination statement is always written for a certain day, not year, because it makes a huge difference whether you're describing something on January 1st or December last, right? So there's, you know, there's a year in between. So examples of statements or sentences that we can use here is, for example, SE is a code, and it stands for key stakeholder expectation or stakeholder expectation. So the first perspective of this destination statement is, how do the owners and customers see us? So we're trying to step in their shoes and describe how are we looking financially on that day, and what are we delivering? What's our value proposition to the customer? So a number of sentences, many of them are typically quantified. We're after as much precision as possible. So here I have, for example, a couple of sentences that speak about how they see their future. For example, that's number 3, that heated tobacco units represent 70% of company total volume. Or for example, that the company has replaced 50% of the revenue from cigarette sales with revenues from sales of risk-reduced products, etc. So you're talking about very exact, sometimes data that speak about sales volumes, or the certain product that you're selling, or about how the consumers see you, how do they perceive you, such as my products and services are environmentally friendly. Or for example, PMI is known globally for its smoking addiction management initiatives, things like that. So these sentences have to be really clear and, you know, lucid in a way. That's just one perspective. The second perspective is, which external relationships can we use to make sure that these key stakeholder expectations are met? And here we have, for example, suppliers. We can have governments. I'll share with you some, for example, PMI partners with eco-friendly organizations and NGOs in recovery projects to manage its environmental externalities. So the company decided that they have to do something about the externalities that they do with their plants, with their, you know, with their growing of their key materials, you know, substances. So that was one. Or for example, in collaboration with healthcare institutions and NGO, PMA addiction management program helps smokers worldwide switch to less harmful alternatives, or even quit smoking. That was another. So these are the two perspectives that describe this, you know, external view of the organization: owners' expectations, customers' expectations, and then who is helping us, because the companies don't have to do that by themselves, you know, alone. There are so many organizations and partners that can help. Media, for example, can help you, or it can restrict you in your success, right? But then there are also two perspectives that are internal. So the next one is internal processes and capabilities. And here the company describes its processes. It could be R&D processes, it could be HR processes, it could be logistics processes. So you're describing what's going on differently on that day. And then the fourth perspective is about how the organization is organized differently and what kind of a culture is running their processes. So the fourth perspective is about the structures and the systems you're using so that the processes can run differently. So in terms of the sequence, the fourth one was mentioned the last, organization and culture, but actually it's the engine of change. So because of the new culture or new structure, the processes can run differently. And because of that, we have new partners. And because of that, we have higher success. So the key focus here is that you describe the future so precisely that nobody is unsure about what it means. When we did that for our school, for the School of Economics and Business a couple of years ago, and I spoke to the members of the academic community, to my colleagues and to students, etc. My question was, is what we are talking now, is it enticing? Is it inviting? Do you want to be part of this? You want to be part of this school? So it has to be like this. So that's the first one. Make sure that your future is clearly described, not unclear, not vague. Now the second one is strategy. So how do we make sure that people understand how these changes towards this destination are going to happen? Quickly, slowly, how intensively, right? And now this is the first question for you. What I have here is 4 definitions by celebrated strategists. Porter to be one, and then Sloaner, Shepard, Podolny, Barney, Kim and Moborn from INSEAD, France, the leading business school in Europe. And if you look at their definitions, what I want to be after is a tiny word, a really small word, but you will find it in every of those 4 sentences. And this word is the key. It's the basics of what strategy is. Can you find it? Vojka. If you look at the word, it's a very small word. It's like not very important, but exactly, yeah. Vojka wrote it in chat. So it's about the how. You see it there in the first one. You see it here, here, and here. Strategy is about how. So no matter how many sentences or words somebody's using in explaining what the strategy is, if you don't hear the answer to how, it's not strategy. And in fact, we rarely hear this how. We often hear managers speaking about the size of the market share that they're after. So our strategy is to increase market share by 10%. It's fine, but I don't know how you're going to do that. This is basically a goal or an objective. The reason why we don't hear this how is often legitimate, because they don't want to share it with us. They don't want to share it with anybody, right? But then they should not be using strategy for something that is not strategy, right? I think what more often happens is that we don't know how we should proceed in the future, right? So this is a difficult question. That's what I'm saying. Sometimes answering this how is just very difficult, right? Now, another definition, which I like very much, is by Jones and Hill, but they don't use the word how. They're using a combination of words that says even more than the how, but it's basically the same. And it's, if you look at it, it's the beginning of the sentence. It's a set of related actions. So that's what it is. That's the strategy. Sometimes I get asked, I get a document and I'm asked to look at the document and say if it makes sense, if it's a good strategy. And I see actions, but I don't see relationships among actions. And then I cannot be very positive, right? It's all about understanding relationships between what I do now and what I can expect that will happen. And can I do something simultaneously, or should I finish this action first and then go with the next one? So it's about understanding connections, relationships. And this, the word that we use for drawing strategies is strategy map, very common, or strategic linkage model also. So what we see here is Philip Morris International Corporate Strategy. A bit specific in terms that it doesn't end up, if you look at the top of this diagram, it doesn't speak about profit or EBITDA or value added per employee or something, but it talks about whether after this is to be the industry leader, to set the terms, to set the pace of change, to set the innovations in this industry. The industry leader for innovative and sustainable RRP is risk-reduced products. But what I would like you to look at is basically the arrows. An arrow says more than a line. If we're using lines to connect two items, we're basically saying that two items are correlated, but we're not saying which one impacts on the other one, right? The arrow speaks about causality. It says that, for example, exploring new industry options, like this activity, exploring new industry options, can help generate new smoke-free alternatives. Or it says that if we manage to become a company with recyclable and biodegradable products, then we can look after this goal that we lower manufacturing footprint by 25%. So it talks about causality. What you see on the lower part of this strategy map, the black ovals, as we call them, are activities, and SA stands for strategic activity. SO stands for strategic outcome. And what you see here is that in total, we have 8 strategic activities. Why is this important? That's something that I would like you to remember for your own work or your own advice, whatever you're going to share with other, partners or, businesses, friends, is that regardless of the size of the company and the market power, the money or the, manpower, whatever, strategy should always follow one very simple rule. And this is the rule that speaks about the minimum intervention. At any point of time, try to change as few things as possible. So try to minimize simultaneous changes. We call this the principle of minimum intervention. And it says that even large companies, large corporations like this one, PMI, should not plan to have, 15 strategic activities planned, even though they have money and people, and one would say, well, they have it all. The same rule applies regardless of size on every companies, and it is make sure that the level of stress that is connected to changes is not going to become overwhelming. People are the same in small and large organizations, and this is that we cannot manage more than so much, right? So whenever there's this perception, there's going to be lots of changes, and they're going to take place simultaneously. People start, panicking. So stress as such, what does it mean? People start doing things that are not functional. They start behaving completely differently. They do things that you would never expect them to do. That's what stress does to us, and you don't want that. So 8 strategic activities, that's just enough, I have worked with a large pharmaceutical organization a couple of years ago, and they were trying to persuade me that they'll be completely fine with 12 changes, 12 strategic activities, changing globally. And I said, it'll be too much. No, we'll do fine. So they went after that. So we composed a complex strategy map, this linkage model with 12 changes and their consequences, and everything looked fine. But I was concerned. In a year and a half, they came back and they said, it was wrong. We haven't done basically anything except for one change in a couple of processes, and we started doing something on IT, but everything else just stopped. It was like a complete paralysis across all these changes. People were overwhelmed with the simultaneous changes that were planned. In large organizations, maybe 8, 9 activities. In smaller ones, maybe 5 to 6 across, again, 3 to 5 years period of time. Little changes, the operational one, that's not what we're counting here. These are the big ones, the big changes. So that's a short discussion around strategy maps or strategic linkage models. Now, the third thing was inadequate information sharing, and this is about performance measures and the targets that we're using. Now, what we see here is I'm using the same PMI corporate strategy map, and I have, depicted a couple of KPIs. For example, if one of the goals is that PMI reduces its global carbon footprint, And they're doing this through a number of activities. Here on the lower level, you see SA8, educate consumers on cigarette disposal. And what they want to do is to introduce cigarette butt disposal system or collection system. And that's something that's going to generate the decrease in the global carbon footprint. If you want to be sure that this is actually happening, you have to measure, you have to introduce KPIs along every chain of causal relationships. That means that you have to measure both whether you have reduced global carbon footprint, but also whether, if this is not happening, could it be because we haven't introduced the cigarette butt collection system, or because we are not educating consumers on this exists. So KPIs have to support every part of your strategy map. These couple of examples here on top are just a few of them, such as, for example, the KPI could be share of countries with PMI cigarette butt collection system, or tons of cigarette butts collected monthly, and then percentage decreasing global carbon footprint. KPIs are basically a verbal expression of what you're going to measure. A good KPI reflects the formula, so it speaks about the formula. And unless you clarify what you're going to measure, I think you have an issue. People will not know what to focus on, how hard to work, depending on targets, how ambitiously they have to work. So KPIs are really important. Now, the next thing is the cascading, so unclear responsibility at lower levels. Cascading means that if we have a complex organization with levels that are hierarchically at various stages of responsibility, so we have, I don't know, 2 or 3 levels, I think in that case, it should make sense to go after this cascading. If the company is small, then you can have only one strategy. But if you have a larger corporation, then you have to start with the big strategy, the corporate strategy, and then you go down to business units, or even lower down to functional units. So what you see here is this corporate level, and then at lower levels, the business units, and then functional units. But what we often see in practice, and that's wrong, is that the cascading takes place or is done along strategies, along changes. That is wrong. The only thing you can cascade, you should cascade, is the destination or the targets, So the appropriate approach is that you start with the destination statement on top, you clarify where the company is going to be at a certain future date, how it's going to look like financially in terms of what customers get, what's delivered to them, the processes, etc. And then this top level destination statement is supported by, we call them contribution statements at lower levels. So the alignment takes place along these destinations. The destination statement impacts on the contribution statement at business unit level and then at the functional unit level. So the alignment is along these statements. Every level expresses, for example, if we take HR department as a functional unit, the HR looks at the contributions or at the destination statement here on top. They look at this and they ask themselves, how should we look like as a unit? What our new processes have to be, how our new teams look like, what are the new partnerships we're going to build, so that we can contribute to the achievement of the destination statement. And their contribution statement explains how they're going to look like on that same day, but from their own perspective. Thea is asking how important is the internal communication team for the cascading in practice. So how do we do that? We start on top. So the first part is the destination statement on top. Once it's done, and in the creation of the top destination statement, people from other areas participate as well. If the organization is big enough, I typically work with 40 people. If there's a small organization, for example, right now I'm working with a company that has only 25 employees, the team is a little, of course, considerably smaller, but still I work with 10 people. And these include, all decision makers, managers, but also smart people, the young ones, the innovators with their fresh minds who have good ideas. They work all on the destination statement. Let's say 40 people work on that. And then they withdraw to their own departments and they create their own ones later at a later stage with their own teams, just their own, like HR head with their, assistants and with other professionals. They create their own contribution statement, and it has to be aligned with the destination statement. If we achieve that alignment across these final destinations, so to speak, everything else, their own little strategies at low levels, their own little changes will naturally be aligned with whatever the top people are changing, right? So the natural alignment follows because you have aligned the targets. And at every level, we have different issues. At every level, we have different changes required, right? So the communication of the changes that are required is not forced. It's not enforced. That's wrong. The only communication we have to have together is how do we see our future and make sure that we understand this future in a similar fashion. So what you're going to see now is, and we did that in spring this year, is an example of a contribution statement. So the contribution statement that you see here is for sales and communication department. So keep in mind, the first set of statements that I showed were for the global PMI. What we're going to see now is just for the sales and communication people, but they have started, generating their ideas for then sentences from the first one, from the destination statement. The same headings apply. You have key stakeholder expectations, and then you have external relationships and processes and capabilities and organization and culture. But all the sentences, you see that there are less, maybe 3 to 4, except for the first one. The first one is still quite complex, 6 sentences. But all those sentences speak about sales and communication only, nothing else. But of course, sales and communication, they have to spend all their, resources and ideas and efforts on making sure that the share of heated tobacco units increases in terms of sales volumes, that the promotion of these new products is extensive and successful, that the public's understanding of what they're trying to do in terms of decreasing the global environmental impact, that they achieve that. So it's all towards the big goals. But the processes and the changes that they're doing at the level of sales and communication, it's only theirs. It's only theirs. So these contribution statements are always smaller, more compact, because they speak about much smaller teams, smaller units. And then the process of how do we create a strategy map, it's the same, and I'll show you later on. So this is a communication and sales strategy map. It has, again, 6 activities. They believe that they have to do these activities, make these changes, otherwise they will not be able to increase the value of the brand, of the new brand that they're after. But the activities are around, for example, if you look like, so here we have educate the marketing people, employees on market specifics and product novelties. Whatever R&D people are designing, developing, we have to know how to sell that. Create PR content to support responsible marketing and sales of heated tobacco units. Or use social media to inform about the progress. Collect consumer data to support responsible packaging policies. I'm not sure if you're aware about the fact that the packaging varies from country to country. So in Western Europe, Central Europe, what we see is responsible packaging with warnings, how cigarettes can be harmful to health, while in some countries where their regulation is not as strict, there are no warnings about that. And PMI has decided that they will unify their packaging globally. So the SO5, for example, says packaging compliant with the highest regulatory requirements, regardless of which country we're talking about. even if it's Serbia or any other country. So again, communication skills, or enhance internal communication on corporate values, establish addiction recovery centers, things like that. So these are not global or corporate level issues or changes. These are sales and communication changes. Now, to sum up the process that somehow I think started to appear in the back of these 4 challenges and solutions to these challenges is, and I always use a very simple picture, simple explanation is that if strategy is about how do we get from A, which is today, to some destination that we're after, like Alice, right? So we have to speak about this A and B. So A is about where we are today. And we have to understand the problems we are facing today and the challenges that are, backfiring us. So what is impeding us to be more successful? And one would think, well, is this a problem? Do we have to discuss that in detail or in depth? It is. When I work with large corporations, that is even more so, because people don't communicate as often or as honestly with each other. It is not so rare that a workshop or a series of workshops that we do is the first time that people from so many different departments sit together and share their views with each other. So understanding where we are and why we are where we are today, that's a challenge on its own. So this A is one. And then agreeing on the future, the destination statement, that's another challenge. People have very different views and expectations. And you have to, at some point, agree on this common future. So that's B. And then once you have A and B, the path is really clear. So how do we get from one to another? That's exactly what strategy is about. It's about this path. And if we spend, in terms of hours, we usually spend maybe a day or 2 days together on a workshop to clarify what this A is, what are our problems, what are issues, how good are we? And then we spend maybe a day or a day and a half on the destination statement, but you have to sleep it over, right? And once you have A and B, you don't need more than a day to construct the strategy map. It's really very simple, because your target, and the target is B, your target is fixed. If you fix the target, then there is no ambiguity. It is so easy. It is so effective. So that's the process. Now, if I quickly go back to this cascading, I mentioned earlier that the cascading takes place along destinations, right? Along those destinations as we call them. Once these destinations are aligned, every level constructs its own strategy map. So this, how do we get from A to B? It's very, department specific or business unit specific. This is why we never push changes, strategy from top to lower levels. We only push the targets. The B is cascaded, but not how do we get to A, from A to B. That's not cascaded. That would be the wrong approach. Okay. Do you have any questions so far, or what are the challenges that maybe you face in your practice when you work with either your own company or if you work with others? Do you have any other challenges? Anna? What is your experience with strategies, Anna Feconia?
Hi, sorry. I expect to be called. I'm actually a student, and now I'm thinking about starting some project or work within sustainability strategies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Maybe you can put the camera on so we can see. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, can we see each other?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm now thinking about this, and that's why I also wanted to. I don't have many experience with developing strategies, I don't know if I'm the best source of opinion here, but I observe quite a lot of companies that I came across, and I see that it's very complex thing to incorporate changes into the culture, and the effect that it usually has on people is usually that people want to refuse what is trying to change. So that's a big challenge to tackle regarding the strategies, especially in sustainability. It's even more different because it's even harder to understand at some points, because it's maybe not the perfectly clear income at the end. Is that we can talk about it. It's broader. So yeah.
Yeah, I think there are two issues which you outlined very clearly, and I think they matter very much, and I'll address them quickly. So the first one is that people they fear changes and they don't want to be part of that. One way to avoid that is to include them in the strategy development process. Don't fear to integrate lots of people at various stages in various forms. As I mentioned earlier, I typically work with 40 people at a workshop. When I worked with a very successful high-tech company that has only 31 employees, everybody participated. We found a way so that everybody could join us. It was Friday afternoon and then Saturday. So we worked together, but everybody, even the secretary joined us. And all the developers, they worked so hard. And they found fun in it, and they enjoyed it, and they were part of it. There was a high level of buy-in.
But how do you sorry?
I didn't catch that, Anna.
How do you motivate people to take part in this workshop if they are not they don't see the potential benefits? Sometimes it's the initial barrier that's very hard to come across, especially if you're coming from outside and they're like, oh, you don't know us, you don't know how the things are done around here, and we're the professionals and you're just coming to.
You're right, Anna. The role of the consultant is never, you're never in the role of an authority. So you never speak to the organization like I'm speaking to my students. So I never teach them, I never preach them. I'm only the facilitator. So you have, if I work with 40 people, I have to learn all of them. What they do, names, family names, what they do, what they're responsible for. And I do lots of interviews before I enter the organization, usually from 10 to 15. So I get to know people really very well. So when we are together in a room, I'm no more a stranger to them. Moreover, I think I know really well what's going on, what are the different agendas they have, what are the different fears they are sharing. So I can manage the flow of communication really smartly, really effectively. But the concern that people will not want to participate, I think it happens really rarely. At one organization with a bit more than 30 employees, only one didn't want to participate, and we didn't push him. So the managing director said, fine, you can stay out of this process. I can understand the reasons why you don't want to be part of this, but everybody else looked at this as a great opportunity to be able to co-create the future. So it's a form of an intrinsic motivation, actually. So people are very thankful. This spring I worked, and it was an online, all the workshops were via Zoom. I worked with a larger organization with lots of hundreds of people, and we could barely, narrow the number to 45. So people just kept, applying, can I join too as well? But what we found out later is that the capacity of everybody was not at the right level. So not everybody can help or can be helpful. So people have to be knowledgeable and creative. if there are none of this, then they can be there, but they will not be contributing. And if you're not contributing, then you feel like, what am I doing here? That's it's like a disappointment. So you have to select these people smartly, open the door, invite people, but narrow the number to the manageable size. I cannot memorize typically more than 40 people. I'm honest, that's my capacity, mental capacity. So 40 people is manageable. More than that, it's very difficult. But make sure that the right people are there, the smart ones, ambitious ones, or the ones tasked with decision making. But the second, also important question was around sustainability. And because sustainability strategies are very topical today, I would say not only topical, I think that's the future. It's unavoidable. I mean, it's a must. So the sooner you get on this train, the better you will travel, the more comfortable this travel is going to be. If you're going to be late, you're going to be either left out of this business or be a laggard. So with the sustainability strategies, I think the key challenge is how to communicate the financial benefits of this, because many either owners or managers, they speak the money language. Yeah. So they're after short-term results and short-term benefits, and they don't want to wait for 5 years before the brand, proves its value, and so they want short-term. They want win-win situations. I worked with a large organization that was taken over by a foreign owner, and this foreign owner was, of course, after profits only. And we switched the original language, which was around the sustainability effects, the benefits for the nature, for the people, and for the economy. We switched quickly to monetary. Whatever we were talking about, I was able to monetize the effects. If there were, for example, benefits to the people, to the employees, I would speak about the benefits of, for example, decreasing regrettable loss. So if people are not leaving the organization, that saves a lot of money to the organization. If presenteeism goes down, people attending jobs, even though they're sick, the hidden cost of labor go down. If absenteeism goes down, again, the hidden cost of labor go down. You can monetize just about anything. And you have to switch quickly. You have to use money in everything. Yeah. But sure, yeah. This was a little addition that I wanted to talk about today, also about sustainability strategies, which are, like a baby to me. So I'm a huge fan of sustainability strategies. And what I'm showing here is that you see on this left part, that's a key element. It's called the materiality matrix. You cannot start the strategy development process if you're after this sustainability strategy without a materiality matrix. It's part of this analytical part at the beginning. It's you set the pace, the content of your story with this materiality matrix. And right now I'm working with over 5 organizations with different sizes, with different problems, exactly on this. What should their materiality matrix be about? And I'm going to share with you, of course, this case, the PMI materiality matrix, which you see right here. So what is this matrix? It depicts the key sustainable issues that this organization should be facing to make sure that their profits go up. So materiality metric is not about what is good for the nature, for the people, for the employees or local communities or clients, or for your business partners, just because it's the right thing to do. It's not just about ethics. It's about what will help you grow your revenues faster in a more stable fashion, or help you manage costs more efficiently. So it's about business impact as well. It has two lines of thinking. So one is what is important to stakeholders, and then what out of these stakeholder important or related issues can help you be more successful financially. So whatever you have on top right quadrant, or we sometimes broaden that to this area. So this is something that should be integrated in your strategy. If you don't do that, I think you're losing lots of important opportunities for your future business success. And as you go, you do something good for the planet. If you read, for example, what we identified for Philip Morris International. The first one was responsible selling, responsible commercialization. The second one was cigarette butt disposal. You have no idea how many tons of butts are lying around the planet. And because they are such a big brand, they're causing this, or they're co-creating this. Then lung-related disease research. You know, their pledge now is that they will disclose not honestly, openly, whatever research findings they get to, not just favorable, right? Any. In general, transparency and disclosure about the processes that they do and the externalities that they cause, etc. You know, or this one, extensive health testing before product release, things like that. So we identified that based on this. There were around 44 students participating in the identification, and then we launched a survey, and we actually ask our stakeholders, are we addressing the right issues? And they rank. Now the rank is from top to bottom. So they rank how important these issues are, and then the top ones are then subject of discussion. What are the likely financial benefits of any of those 13 issues if we address them strategically? So here is the addiction management, recovery projects related to the crops and the plants that the land that they're using for their crops, and they're aware that there's some damage to the nature. Materials that they're using, are they recycling any toxic chemicals that they're using, etc. So 13 really topical issues. We had a big discussion with the head of sustainability in PMI later on in spring, and he was shocked how well this group of 45 students with their brain and efforts identified these 13 issues. And he said, I sign all of that. This is exactly what we're actually thinking up in Switzerland. But you have just shortened our decision-making process. You made it so clear and so simple. So materiality metrics is the beginning. And it's worthwhile spending a couple of weeks on identifying what is material to our stakeholders, and then think about how can any of those issues help you manage costs more successfully in the run of a couple of years, right? Or grow your revenues. Any other questions? I know it's 3 minutes to 4, and my first promise always is that I will never spend more time than you were willing to spend as well. So we're not going any minute after 4. I think that the workshop that I planned to have was really simple, and it was about how do we create strategic linkage models, and maybe I'll spend just a minute on that. So what we have on top is a couple of either numbers or specific targets from the destination statement. So the destination statement could say that much profit, that's what the owners expect. That's the the level of revenues they're after, and they want to decrease cost of goods and services, right? So that comes from the destination statement. And at the lower levels, we have activities. And these activities are constructed based on ideas of all the participants in a workshop. But we have to, there's a fun technique that we use to cluster ideas into, we cluster them typically around business functions. So something is around maybe R&D, something is around logistics, something is around manufacturing. So the clustering of ideas is really important. And we end up with those clusters of ideas labeled with their names. And these names are, like you see them here, identify and expand into new markets, or maybe attract talents by good corporate branding, etc. So we then ask ourselves, if we successfully complete this activity, what is the outcome? Or if we successfully complete this activity, what is the outcome? So that's how we go. We go in pairs first, and then we draw the strategy map. We connect the outcomes with each other, and then come to the top. The left part is usually, as you see here, the left part of the strategy map is typically around how do we grow revenues, and the right part of the strategy map is typically how do we maintain costs, how do we manage costs successfully as we grow. The cost will always go up if you grow, but you want to keep the slope of the cost curve lower than the slope of the revenue curve, right? Okay, so that was all for today. I hope you found a couple of interesting insights or issues that triggered new thinking. Strategy can be a very simple concept, but it has to be very inclusive as a process. Thank you, Jana.
Thank you. Thank you for Adriana for your really nice examples, and it gave me quite some thoughts how important things, how important strategy really is, and we tend really to forget. And the thing that we should every quarter rethink about it, I think it's the thing that really touched me somehow. Unfortunately, well, we are running out of time, but there's a HUA app where we can discuss, or if you have some additional question, or you can open the topic, or you can share articles into HUA, and you will, Thea will then paste the link in the chat. And I hope you all enjoyed this lecture. And we would really appreciate if you can rate it in the HUA app, because it will help us to do even better for the future. And I also have to mention that this workshop was organized by the University of Ljubljana and University of Maribor by Knowledge Transfer Offices in collaboration with our partners and co-financed by Republic of Slovenia and European Union under the European Regional Development Fund. At the end, UNI.MINDS Festival is still going on, and this is the agenda for this week. And please check it out. There are some interesting topics, and feel free to join us where you feel most passionate about. We'll be very happy to see you again. And for the end, I would just like to say that take care and keep an open mind, and see you at some other session. Thank you for your attendance. Bye-bye.